While many of you have probably been enjoying the plethora of online events, classical chess over the board is back with Norway chess. It's a field of 6 due to coronavirus travel restrictions, and Norway chess is pretty unique because both players get 2 hours with no bonus time, and also if the game ends in a draw, they have to play Armageddon. The way that works is you get 10 minutes versus 7, white with 10, black with 7, a draw results in a win for black, and the scoring system is 3, 1.5, 1, and 0. Let's jump into today's games. We have Levon, Aronian, and Magnus Carlsen to kick things off because, well, I'm not going to spoil it. The players began with a Queen's Gambit, declined, very standard. Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces, opts for the Rogozin defense. This is a variation which is extremely popular, extremely theoretical. There's a lot of different variations here with CD5, Bishop G5. I like Queen A4 check a lot, forcing black to play Knight C6 to defend the bishop. But Levon goes for this, and we get kind of like a Nimso. Early capture, Rook C1, Rook E8, and this kind of unique trade of the light-scored bishops with Bishop A6. So takes, castles, and now Bishop F8. Now, during the live stream, I had said that I don't recommend beginners play like this, and just so you guys know on YouTube, I'm recording this live right now. My Twitch chat is laughing at me, and it's really distracting. And I said, if you're a beginner, don't play like this. Don't put pieces back on their home squares. But he does this because there's no place that you can put the bishop. And he wants to play C5, but he doesn't want to trade. So for now, he puts his bishop back here, and the bishop might come out this way with G6 and Bishop G7 and so on. Then we get Knight E2. This is a reroute maneuver for Levon. He wants to play Queen A4 as well. Now the bishop is open on this side of the board. Now Queen C8 from Magnus. And that move looks like it doesn't make any sense. But Magnus is a beast at optimizing his position, at seeing long-term what he wants his position to look like. And Magnus wants to put the queen on B7, from where it will be the only defender of the D5 pawn, and then play C5, Rook C8, and Rook D8. And he has no other way to do that. If he puts his queen here or here, it's in the way of the rook. And watch. C5, Knight G3, Queen B7, takes, Knight takes, Queen B5, Rook C8. Everything as I said. This knight is going to come to the middle. Maybe this knight comes this way. That's exactly what he does. Levon tucks his queen back on F1. E2 also very natural. But Knight E2 is actually the move that he wants to play. If he put his queen on E2, he would still have a perfectly good position. And basically, this position's equal. But to talk a little bit more about it, most importantly, there's an isolated pawn on D5 for black. And an isolated pawn wants friends around, like pieces, knights, bishop, so that you can use the pawn to lock in a certain square. What Levon does, the way you're supposed to play against an isolated pawn position, trade pieces, get it to an endgame. You don't have to trade every piece you have, but that pawn's going to be a target, especially if you can secure the square in front of it, and then trade down some pieces. We get Knight E4, Bishop E1. This looks really silly, but again, maintaining vision. And Levon was very passive. He was under some pressure, but Magnus never really got anywhere. And Levon just kind of shuffled. They traded a piece. Levon kicked out, he was going to kick out the knight by playing Queen D3 and F3. And instead, here Magnus Carlsen offered a repetition of moves, and he accepted. Now, at this point, the scoring is still 0-0. The players leave the room. They come back into the room. One guy has 7 minutes. That's Magnus Carlsen. No bonus time. Levon has 10 minutes. If you win in Armageddon, you get 1.5 points. If you lose the Armageddon, you get 1 point. All right? No bonus time until move 40. At the 40th move, you get 1 bonus second. So let's see what happens. D4, Knight F6, and now the difference is A6. At this point, by the way, the two other guys are still playing. This is something that I'll talk about a little bit later, but we'll see. So CD5, ED5, captures, plays like this, and Queen B3. So Levon plays aggressively, hits both pawns, and at this point, he doesn't take this, because this is actually just not good. If you were to take this, I would play Queen D8, E4, and C6. I would be hitting your knight, and there's just nothing you can do to move it. You're just going to lose material. So Magnus plays Queen D8, Levon goes G3, and then here plays H4, because you can't be a super GM nowadays. Again, you are contractually obligated to play at least one random, completely nonsensical H4 in the middle of a game. But actually, this does make sense because he wants to play knight g5 and take this bishop. So we get bishop e7, this trade, and then long castle. Now, one thing about the time situation, at this point, Levon has 9 minutes and Magnus has 4.5. I'm not kidding. I don't know why he has 4.5, but he has 4.5. So he has 4.5 minutes. Take, c6, solid. e4, breaking early. Since you're playing against the guy that has no bonus time, what I would say here is you wanna kind of stall things out a little bit. I mean, wait to make a decision like that. Because what happens is that now Magnus is extremely solid and he's able to trade some pieces, and the rest of the game is kind of easy for him, even with the time situation where he's down like, you know, down to 2 minutes for his remaining 20 moves, which is crazy, by the way. 2 minutes, 20 moves. Maybe I underestimate how fast some of you play, but that's not a lot of time. And taking this is too dangerous because you're just going to pin yourself. And so, you know, Magnus is baiting that move, but it's not going to happen. g4, and then g5, and then we got this position. And so here, Levon basically has like a minute and a half, a minute 45 versus 1 minute. And he just kept taking his time. Like, in this position, Levon spent like 30 seconds. I don't understand why, because just play a move, like here, or just play a move. Just play a move, like, because again, it's the time. So he spent like 30 seconds, then this, and then he spent like another 30 seconds, and then played this. And then, after c5, Levon had 30 seconds or so for about 12 moves. And Magnus just moved his pieces around, took a pawn on h4, and, you know, shuffled his queen and played a move. And, you know, I mean, Levon just played king a3 because it was the fastest move that he could play, and then hung a rook and lost. He actually lost on time, I think. I'm not even sure he had enough time to resign. So, to me, it's absolutely... And again, this is move 37, so he never got his 1 second of bonus time. So, how do you start a game with 3 minutes extra, but you lose the game on time? I mean, of course, he was going to lose on time, even with losing the rook. So that to me was so surprising. And another thing that was really surprising to me is, think about this. They're in the same room as the other guys, right? The other guys are playing their games. Can you imagine? You're sitting there thinking, and I mean, I made the same joke on live stream, so sorry if you saw it in the same place, but the dudes are making them, you know, slamming the clock on like 3 feet away from you. I mean, at least put them in another room or something, like, you know, noisy toddlers. So, yeah, this format is really interesting, but the games, they don't wait. They just come back and they just play their game. So, anyway, Magnus wins. So, Magnus has 1.5 now. Levon has 1 for making it. And let's take a look at the last 2 games of the round. The first one that we'll start with is Jan Krzysztof Duda versus Alireza Firouzja. Karo Khan. Jan Krzysztof is like top 15 in the world, I believe, and Alireza is Alireza. No more introduction necessary. A classical Karo Khan, very surprising. Again, I'm going to say this time and time again. You want to beat the Karo Khan, you got to play 3 e5 or, I don't know, king e2. Those are the only 2 ways. The classical Karo Khan is completely fine for black. The position that the players reached with h4, h6, the point is that you're trying to trap the bishop. This is all theory. This is all theory, and I hate to just dispose it like that, but it's the classical Karo Khan main line with bishop f5. The move played on the 4th move. This has been seen tens of thousands of times, and really the only interesting break in the position began right here. So here, black usually either takes the knight or plays the move c5, and black played c5. Now, they have 2 hours per player, right? Duda spends 40 minutes on his next move, like 35, 40 minutes, and plays a non-standard move, a move that's subpar. Really here, white is either supposed to take the knight, take the pawn, or play g4. And the point of g4 is that if takes, I go rook g1, and that's, you know, you're sacrificing a pawn for an open line on the enemy king. I personally like g4 the most, but I think g4 has been worked out. Black is completely fine. I play this position a lot with black. So, knight g4 was not played in the game. Instead, g4 wasn't played in the game. We got bishop to e3. Knight takes e4, and Firouzja gives away the b7 pawn, and he does that for good reason. Plays the move knight d5. The same thing, really, if rook b8. Taking this pawn is way too dangerous, because now after rook a8, I'm going to bring my queen, and yeah. This is not worth 2 pawns. Definitely not worth 2 pawns. You are going to get absolutely steamrolled here. This is not going to go very well. Okay? I think the way I played this, maybe white can take on e7, but it's probably too dangerous. I think taking on e7 just loses. There's probably some decisive attack on a2. So instead, in the game, Duda played queen a6. Very important move. Rook b8. Takes, and bishop to f6. Now, the bishop and the knight line up this way. Rook is down, pressuring. And remember, this whole time that Firouzja is spending his time just as equally as Jan. Knight comes back to b3, and the players have lined up all their pieces. We got 2 rooks, queen staring down, bishop staring down, knight staring down. And Alireza finds a beautiful idea here. Very nice idea. You can pause if you want. If you're watching on Twitch as I'm recording this, I'm sorry. You guys are just gonna have to pretend to pause. Just like hit your monitor with your finger or something. A great move here. Firouzja's maximized this position to its fullest extent, and there is nothing that can be done to go forward. So Firouzja goes backwards. 2 then come forward, and the knight on c4 will put pressure on d2, b2, and so Duda finds a very creative idea. Rook to e4. And the whole point is that now I have a threat of bishop f4, and at some point in the future, my rook will take on c4. And that's exactly what happens. Knight c4, bishop f4, queen b6, takes. Duda is up a pawn, but about to get steamrolled with the a-pawn. So bishop e3, rook comes to b4, lining up the rook to the rook, and now knight a3 check is a threat to potentially do something like this. f3, and Duda sacrifices the rook, and begins his process of consolidation. Now, this is a truly fascinating endgame. 3 passed pawns on the queen side for Duda. 4 on 2 for Alireza and 2 rooks. And let's not forget, it's move 38. Duda has 3 minutes to go to make the time control. And Alireza has like 12, I believe. And Duda just consolidates brilliantly, brings his king, brings back his knight, and begins to push his pawns. But Firouzja is also pushing his pawns. But Duda's pushing his pawns. But Firouzja's pushing his pawns. And then they trade bishops. That's just a little interlude. Good idea from Firouzja, because otherwise his bishop was terrible, and this bishop was going to monitor these pawns. Now rook h1 to stop this pawn from getting captured. Rook h5. You cannot take, because even though that would work, I would play here, this. But apparently here the position's equal. King c3, I'm going to push my pawn. You're going to push your pawn, I'm going to push my pawn. You're going to push your pawn, and now we see the power of the 4 versus 2. This is not frozen, and in this position there is the move h3, excuse me. Getting rid of this pawn. And after takes, this is called another pawn breakthrough, e4. A stunning move. And in this position, Duda has like 30 seconds on the clock. He does have a 10-second bonus now that they made it to the 40th move, but he fails to find the only defense. And the only defense in this position was the move rook f1, I think. Rook f1. Because if g2, you play rook f2. And you can't promote, and I'm going to win this pawn. And if pawn takes f3, the absolutely ridiculous and astounding knight g1. And the pawns have been frozen. But black is still doing fine. Black is not lost. But, you know, black will try to come down here and, you know, get in with the rook. But a ridiculous defensive sequence here. And he wasn't able to see that. He just wasn't able to see that. And Duda, yeah. What to do? Unfortunate. Instead, Duda played f takes e4, and Alireza stormed in with the pawns. And in this position, it was decisive. f2, you take, I promote. If you take the rook, hoping to get this, I laugh in your face, and I play f1 queen. And that's guarded, and it's over. Your pawns are too slow against the queen and a rook. So Alireza wins, and Alireza gets to 3 points. The kid is back. Hey, look, that's right above me. Alireza's been struggling these past few months. He's not been doing so well online, not potentially living up to the expectations, really the mammoth expectations that people have of him. So It's good to see him back. Nice win, convincing win. Back and forth battle. Duda was very creative with his defense, but not good enough at the end, and Alireza gets the win. The other game of the round was between Tari and Fabiano Caruana. You might say, how can Fabiano Caruana, an American citizen, right, because with all the COVID restrictions, make it to Norway Chess? Live tournament, by the way, not online, in case that wasn't clear yet. He's a dual citizen of Italy, and that's what makes this possible. This was a really interesting game. It was a Sicilian, a Taimanov Sicilian, and I'm curious how much Fabiano can disclose, considering he's going to play in the candidates, so he can't show his full preparation. So he plays this, G3 from Tari, very solid system, trying to castle quickly. And Fabiano goes for a setup where early on, you sacrifice your D6 pawn. Tari damages his own structure, and the players end up trading their queens and knight back to D7. So, a really interesting setup for Fabi, who's down a pawn, traded the queens, but watch him play this game. First, H4 to prevent H4 and G5. Fabi plays King E7, Rook comes back to D2, Knight B6. Trying to threaten this. Obviously, you cannot play B3 because the knight is hanging. And after the sequence, Knight D5 takes. Knight came here. Rook E2 was played in the game. Also, Rook D3 was possible because if Knight B2, there is this move. Forking. Fabiano plays like this. So he's down a pawn. However, because white has a light squared bishop staring into a light squared pawn, Fabiano creates a dark squared blockade, basically negating this bishop out of the game. And Fabiano also controls the only open file. So what do? Protect your center with F6, make sure this pawn is not a weakness, and then double your rooks and start doing damage. And that is exactly what he did. E4 from Tari, A5. Dark squared blockade, stopping the pawn. Mobilizing on the C file, solidifying the center and doubling. And then pressure here, pressure here, pressure here, and G5. Pressure on that side. Now he plays G4, shuts out the bishop, combines the dark squared blockade with this light squared blockade of the bishop. So the pawns can't move anywhere and this pawn can be a target in the future. Then he breaks with F5. Completely locks down white's position and breaks with F5. But doesn't even take it. Plays this one. Obviously, if knight F5, there was rook takes E5. So rook D3, not afraid of a trade of rooks, and E4 takes back his pawn and brings his king to the party. Right? Rook D1, rook C7. It's the 40th move, but it's a lost position for white. He can't defend. His pawns here are too big of a weakness, and soon black will come in with the pawn and the rook. And okay, just one final touch on the position. The B pawn gets involved in the game. B6. Every piece that Fabiano had got to play. The same cannot be said for this pawn yet. Bishop A6, rook F7, rook F8, knight F5. Trying to come in this way, and that's exactly what he does. Knight D5. Both weaknesses. Passive rook staring into the defense of the pawn. Again, the dark squares. The light squared bishop for white is not a factor, and this endgame is simply lost. This is an endgame where black will play rook E2, D2, and so on, and convert. This game shows the difference between a super grandmaster and Aronian Tari. I mean, Aronian Tari is a fantastic player. I've done commentary with him. He's exceptionally strong, Norwegian #2. And Fabiano Caruana slid through this game like, like a knife through soft butter. I mean, not the butter you just like take out from the fridge because that one's terrible. Not like restaurant butter, that they give you in those little containers that like you can't even, not that one, like the much better kind, in case anybody needed explaining. Incredible game. And it's no surprise that Fabiano Caruana is the second best classical chess player in the world. Outstanding play from him, and I look forward to seeing whether he can fight against Magnus in this event. Obviously, I want to see Firouzja do well, I want to see Duda do well, but at some point in one of these events, someone has to not do well. That's the reality of the situation. Let me know who are your top 3 in the comments below, and I'll see you in the recap tomorrow.